The Runaway Wife. This is the story of a fallen Muslim girl. This is also the love story of an Egyptian prostitute who fell in love with one of her male clients, who changed her life for the better. It was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored, or retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by the reviewer, who may cite brief passages from the review for printing a newspaper, a general magazine, a school journal, or university articles. All characters in this book are fictitious, and any resemblance to real people, live or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 6. The runaway wife Ikram tried to speak more, but her words were severely choked in her throat. She took a sip of her strong alcoholic drink, Abyssinian Anisha, and tried again, but she could not utter a single word. It seems that the weight of her tragic story had become too heavy for words to bear. Hafiz approached her ear and whispered lovingly, "Please, my dear, reserve the rest for tomorrow. Now you need to eat and take enough rest." Ikram nodded it in response to her lover's advice. Then she stretched her sexy naked body on the armchair and lay down on it to rest for a while. Hafiz blessed his lips on her cheek and printed a loving kiss on it. Affectionately, she blessed her hand on his head and batted it. Then she took the cup to her lips, but discovered that it was empty. She handed it to Hafiz to fill it. "You have already drunk too much, honey. You must be in a suitable condition to meet your children." "Dear Hafiz," his girlfriend said in a faint voice, "yes, you are right. You have truly become the protector of my life and my savior from a life of vice and loss in prostitution and addiction." While her tears flooded, she had to force those sincere words to come out of her mouth. "In any case," Ikram continued, "I will see them from a distance, and I will make sure that none of my family members, relatives, neighbors, friends, former schoolmates, and other acquaintances see me. For the rest of my remaining life, they cannot see or meet me." Her friend Hafiz became confused about how Ikram wanted to see her children. However, he decided not to bother her with any more questions. Drinking a lot of alcohol made Ikram's eyes red. When she got up from the chair and tried to walk, her steps were unstable, so Hafiz had to hold her for a while before she could walk again. He helped her get to bed. When she reached the bed, she fell on it and slept on her back, completely naked. Hafiz brought a bed sheet and covered her naked body. While she was lying on the bed, he fed her in her mouth as a loving mother fed her child. She wanted to prevent him from feeding her in this way, but he resisted her request. She slept for a long time before waking up again. Then the two lovers decided to go to the place where Ikram said she could see her two sons without any of her acquaintances and relatives seeing her. It was 7 o'clock in the evening when the two lovers got dressed. Ikram disguised herself as an Eritrean refugee girl in Egypt. Her height, long curly hair, and beautiful big eyes helped her dress like a young brunette African girl. She did everything she could to hide her Egyptian Nubian identity. The sari top completely obscured her face except for her eyes. She put sandals on her feet. Hafiz was also dressed as a young Eritrean man. He was wearing the blue jeans and a white shirt. He combed his hair and made it look like a small bush on his head. He used khulal, which is a gray African plastic comb, and stuck it in his hair. On the shoulder of his left arm, he pinned a long, sharp dagger. The dagger was encased inside a red leather sheath. He was holding a large wooden stick in his right hand. Then the two friends left the hotel and entered the crowded street. They had to force their way forward. The day was the 12th day of Maulid an-Nabi, the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. For 12 days, the entire city's population gathers in the spacious square of Freedom Ground to celebrate the Prophet's birthday. The last day was the climax of the celebration because it was the actual day on which the messenger of Islam was born. Each religious group will have its own constituency. In each circle, booths of remembrance and praise are held. Men gather in light circles, holding hands together, and perform zikr, praise, and worship as they sing and dance in honor of God and His Messenger Muhammad. It is a type of religious ritual dance performed only by men. Huge drums will be beat rhythmically with large beaters. Women, girls, and children will gather outside Freedom Square. The women will clap their hands and ululate with their mouths and their tongues, and the children will bounce and jump for joy and excitement. Vendors of sweets, biscuits, various types of cold drinks, food, and gifts keep their tables outside. The movement of large crowds would raise dust in the air and turn the place into a foggy atmosphere. It is difficult to see or recognize anyone. If a mother loses her child or a sister, her little sister, or a woman, her relative by chance, she will not dream of seeing him or her again until the day of resurrection. For this reason, each resident of the assembly locality had their own corner where they met every year. The policemen were traveling on foot and some on horseback. Ikram knew exactly the corner of the people of her area or a neighborhood, the Al-Maidan locality. Since childhood, she would go every year for 12 days and sit there with her mother, Hajja Khadija, her brother, Samir, her cousins, aunties, daughters, and other neighbors. Men were not allowed to sit in the corner where women and their children gather. It is expected that the men and their big male kids will gather inside the spacious grounds of Freedom Square and perform singing, dancing, and religious remembrance. That evening, the beautiful and sexy girl Ikram struggled to make her way through the crowd. Her friend Hafiz had to protect her from being from behind so that no zag or a beggar would harass her. However, from time to time, her breasts and buttocks were touched and pinched by a man's hand. She ignored their lustful touches on her sexy body and kept going. It took the two friends an hour and a half to cover a distance that could be covered in 10 minutes on a normal day. As soon as they approached the specific location of the woman and children of her neighborhood, the faces of the people became familiar to Ikram. She recognized the faces of many female relatives and neighbors. She kept moving forward and getting closer and closer. She suddenly stopped moving forward when her eyes saw the face of a very dear person. She saw it was her beloved mother, Hajj Khadija. There was not much change in her mother's face during her years of absence from homelessness and wandering. Ikram brought her face close to her friend's ear and whispered some words to him. Hafiz stopped pushing her forward. His eyes followed the direction her hand was pointing and saw a woman in her late 50s. Ikram expected to see her two sons, Adil and Imad, with their grandmother. She was disappointed when she did not see any little son standing near her mother. Her mother was surrounded by many relatives and neighbors sitting near her. Her eyes continued to scan the faces of the women sitting in the gathering place of the residents of her neighborhood. Her eyes narrowed and focused on the face of a young woman her age. Ikram recognized that girl immediately. She whispered her name in Hafiz's ear. This is my ex-friend, my former classmate, my rival, and my worst enemy, Nabila, my husband's second Muslim wife. Her boyfriend's gaze moved quickly and stopped on the face of a girl who looked less beautiful than his girlfriend. Ikram then looked around Nabila to see if there was any boy who looked like one of her two sons, Adil and Imad, standing next to her. Nabila was standing near her mother, Aisha, and her other female relatives and neighbors. Ikram felt very worried when she did not see her two sons anywhere. She wondered whether her two children had also been killed after she fled her husband's home. It is a common practice in Islamic society that if a girl becomes pregnant before marriage, her family will kill her or allow her to give birth to her illegitimate child and then strangle and kill the infant. The stray Egyptian girl Ikram was tempted to approach her mother Khadija or her former rival wife Nabila and ask them about the whereabouts of her two sons Adil and Imad. She abandoned the idea when she realized that many of her relatives and neighbors would not hesitate for a moment to call the police, send her to prison, and lock her up awaiting her trial in the criminal court. The only woman she can trust in her is her mother Khadija. But how can she talk to her mother without attracting the attention of other women? Any woman standing there would recognize her voice, and when she heard her talking to her mother while she was veiled, so Ikram rejected the dangerous idea and whispered in her friend's ear and asked him to take her back to the hotel immediately. Chapter 7. That night, the former Egyptian prostitute Ikram couldn't sleep. She stayed awake for a long time thinking about her two sons, Adil and Imad. She tried to convince herself that her children were not killed because of the sins of their adulterous mother. Memories of those painful days appeared before her eyes as if she was watching a horror movie. She remembered the tragic events of her life minute by minute. With warm tears, she recalled her struggle to live a good life after she fled her hometown. She did everything in her power to protect herself from being disgraced, but she couldn't. She began her honorable work as a maid in the homes of wealthy people. The male members of those families with whom she resided in and had treated her like a slave, sexually harassed her at night, and attempted to rape her several times. The stray girl escaped from those homes and wandered the streets day and night like an outcast person. Even on the streets, she had to hide, sometimes running from bad men and male police officers. The men sexually harassed her and tried to rape her several times during the night, and sometimes they tried to have sex with her in broad daylight, like a bitch with dogs in the streets. Her struggle did not last long until she eventually turned it into a prostitute. Even the fact that she became a prostitute was not sufficient punishment for her Muslim society, which turned her into a drunkard and a sailor for alcohol and drugs. She had become stinking of many vices, reeking of scandal and shame. From a runaway and wayward wife, she became a fallen girl. In those terrible days and dark nights, men devoured her body like wild beasts. They sucked her blood, ate her flesh, and turned her into bones. She lived in those brothels and parts until harvest came to her and saved her like an angel of hope from that miserable and harmful life. Within 12 months, Ikram blossomed again like a beautiful lotus flower, black from the mud and dirt and kept in a healthy place. Her boyfriend brought hope back to her broken heart and, and wounded spirit. Once again, the Egyptian girl Ikram began to think and act like a person with good morals. She missed her two innocent children and came to rescue them from the jaws of her cruel Islamic society. She is willing to put She's willing to put her life in danger in order to remove her two sons, Adil and Imad, from the hands of the people who abused them and held them responsible for a crime they did not commit. They put them in a worse situation than their fallen runaway mother. It is the greatest insult in the Islamic community to call someone an, an illegitimate or a ibn haram or a bint haram. A gay man may tolerate being described as a homosexual or a promiscuous girl as a prostitute or a lesbian, but neither of them can accept being described as an illegitimate boy or illegitimate girl with haram and bint haram. They may kill you on the spot if you describe either of them with that disgraceful and socially unacceptable name. Thus, people began to call Ikram's two sons children of adultery or awlad haram and treated them like illegitimate sons or outcast children. The next morning, the sad mother got up earlier than the day before. This time, she remained lying on the bed like a dead body. Her lover treated her as if she was an injured or sick, suffering from an incurable disease. He kept supporting her back with some pillows and sitting next to her the whole time. After he felt that she was able to speak, he then asked her to continue telling her sad story. Ikram did not remove the Suban Anisha bottle of liquor from her heart and did not stop smoking. She was coughing every now and then. When it was time for her to have breakfast, her boyfriend fed her into her mouth again. She objected to that, bumbling with her words while she was still crying and coughing. Hafiz wiped away her tears and covered her lips with kisses when her mouth stopped speaking and her voice exploded with screams and sobs. Then she said, crying, "Yes, I hate to tell you what happened to me after that. I desperately wanted to return to my husband's home due to the scandal of having given birth to an illegitimate child by my Coptic lover, Gabriel, whom everyone described as an infidel, uncircumcised, impure Christian. I and my family members were suffering from disgrace, and the neighbors' gossip was eating away at my chest like cancer, tormenting my conscience and making me act like a mad woman possessed by demons. I wanted to return to my husband because he began to believe that the illegitimate child was his legitimate, permissible son that he fathered from his own body. I knew that no one could get me out of that hellish life except him. I hated his second wife Nabila and his third wife Fatima. They live now with my husband in his family home. Before I ran away from him, they lived in our parents' homes, and my husband would visit every woman there and have sex with her within the earshot of her family members. Now I know that I will live in the same house with two rival wives who hate me more than they hate the smell of their own boob. So I knew that my life with them and my male child, Adil, would be hellish because none of them had given birth to a child. Specifically, I held his wife, Nabila, responsible for what happened to me and the problem of my inability to return to my husband because he divorced me 3 times. She was the one who objected and spread the news until it reached the ears of the Imam of the mosque, who confirmed the legitimacy of the objection to my returning to my husband until I married another Muslim man and that husband divorced me. My husband's love for me returned again after he began to believe that my ill-gotten child was his son. He often came to my parents' house to meet me. He spent more time with me than he spent with his second wife Nabila and his third wife Fatima. Nabila objected to this and accused me of committing adultery, having sex with or cohabiting with my ex-husband, which is a sexual act forbidden by Islam. She told my husband to his face that he was committing adultery with divorced wife Ikram, whom he divorced her permanently, and therefore she was forbidden to him forever unless another husband fucked her with his penis in her pussy and then divorced her. My husband left his son Adil at Taib Saleh and brought beautiful dresses for me and clothes for the baby. I tried to love my husband as before, but I couldn't. However, I could see that my husband loved his child more than he loved me. The love of my beloved Christian Gabriel remained in my heart. At his house, I continued to meet him secretly, but I avoided physical relations with him for fear that my husband and his 2 wives would find out. It has been 1 year and we have not been able to reunite as husband and wife. My parents did not object to my husband's visits to me. They even let us spend some time alone. But we had never had sex together during that long separation time. The women are gossiping again. The neighbors are starting to talk. Most of them believe Nabila's rumors that my husband and I were cohabiting and living an adulterous life. One day my ex-husband proposed an idea that he thought might solve our intractable problem. He told me that it was possible for us to get remarried if I married another man and that man divorced me one day after our Islamic marriage contract was concluded according to the book of God, the Quran, and the Sunnah of his Prophet Muhammad. At first, I was against the idea. At that time, I could not imagine myself having sex with another man whom I did not love even once in order to return to my ex-husband, who had divorced me 3 times. And I had heard stories of thrice divorced Muslim wives who tried to do this and got into more trouble. What is the guarantee that the second Muslim husband, the so-called muhallil, will divorce me after having sex with me once in my parents' house? Many of these fake husbands broke their vows after marrying those thrice divorced women. My husband said it would be arranged secretly between him and the other man. He also told me that there are men who can be bribed into such fake marriages. When I refused to submit to that sham marriage, my husband told me that the muhallil would only marry me on paper, but that there would not be any sexual contact between me and him, even if it was just once. In other words, the fake husband or the muhallil won't have sex with me. I believe my husband promised and agreed to a second Islamic marriage with another man. Then my husband brought in a man who agreed to be the muhallil for my final divorce from my ex-husband. According to Islamic law, the muhallil is the second husband who is supposed to legalize the private parts of a Muslim wife whose husband has divorced her 3 times and who has forbidden him to take her back as a wife. When the neighbors saw the muhallil man, they knew that he was just a fake husband. I have never seen a man as ugly as that man in my life. He was short in stature, and his head was as large and square as the rest of his body. His little eyes could hardly be seen. He was bald and most likely in his late 50s. My ex-husband made the deal with him. I did not know how much money was paid to him to conclude this legitimate deal. I got married to him on the same day he came to my family house. My former husband brought with him a mazoon who is a graduate of Al-Azhar Sharif University wearing a hat or a red turban, and he has a license from the Ministry of Religious Affairs to conclude marriage contracts between brides and grooms. That sheikh brought with him 2 Muslim men to witness my marriage contract with the muhallil. After the marriage contract was concluded and the Al-Azhari official received the price for his fees, he issued 2 marriage certificates, one for the muhallil husband and one for me as the wife. He blessed our marital union and wished us a happy married life and the birth of a good Muslim posterity. He then left with the 2 witnesses. We agreed that the muhallil husband would sleep one day at my family's house, and the next morning he would divorce me and leave. He slept all night alone in a separate room. My mother spoke to him kindly, served him dinner, and gave him my father's prayer mat on which to perform his night and morning prayers. Chapter 8. Unfortunately, the so-called thrice divorced wife's pussy legalizer or a muhallil broke his promise and refused to divorce me the next morning. My ex-husband threatened to kill him if he did not announce my divorce and leave immediately. Fearing that he would be killed in an oral killing at the hands of my ex-husband, the pussy's legalizer fled in terror. After that, the muhallil husband filed an official complaint with the Sharia court against me as his disobedient or a najis Muslim wife who refused to allow him to have sexual intercourse with her and asked for a divorce from him without a lawful Islamic reason. He also filed a complaint at the police station against my ex-husband, who threatened to kill him if he dared to come near the residence of his ex-wife, whom he divorced 3 times and who became legally forbidden to him. The matter reached His Eminence Imam Sheikh Atiyatullah, who is the Imam of the mosque near us. The Imam said that even if the Muhallil husband agrees to divorce me, I will not be able to return to my ex-husband. He cited the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad in which he said that the second Muhallil husband must taste my honey and I must taste his honey, which means that we must have sex. One pressure was put on Muhallil by my family members, and my ex-husband agreed to divorce me on one condition, which was that I have sexual intercourse with him in bed, even if only once. My husband and family agreed to his condition, but I vehemently refused to allow such an ugly black man, whom I neither love nor recognize as my husband, to have sex with me. My ex-husband begged me to compromise my moral integrity by allowing him to sleep with me once so that he could fulfill the condition of the Prophet Muhammad. May God bless him and grant him peace. After a lot of begging and pressure from family members, and my ex-husband agreed to fulfill the condition of our Prophet, the infallible chosen one. May the best praise and peace of God be upon him. I have never felt more humiliated and abused in my entire life than I did when that ugly man had sex with me in my house in front of my ex-husband and family. His dirty body smelled like the decomposing carcass of a dead animal, while he was fucking me with his sick dick in my pussy. His mouth produced a foul odor. He fell on my naked body just as a male animal fell on the body of its resisting female. Once he attacked my body, I started to fight him and push him away. He was such a powerful monster that I couldn't push him away from my body. I regretted having agreed to be locked in a room with such a brutal man. I did everything to prevent him from raping me and emptying his load of cement into my womb and impregnating me. I scratched his face with my fingernails. I hit his body with my fist. I beat his cheeks and shoulders with my sharp teeth until my mouth was filled with his blood. I screamed at the top of my lungs, but no one came to save me. Before his cock ejaculated into my pussy and emptied his dirty semen into my womb and made me pregnant with his child, I passed out. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself in the hospital. I saw my mother sitting next to me on the bed with a sad face as if she was expecting me to die. My ex-husband was standing near me and looking at me anxiously, as if he was also anticipating the loss of my life. When I looked into his eyes, he turned his face away in shame, as if he felt that he was a bim who had hired another man to fuck his wife and legalize her pussy for him so that he could remarry her again. With bitterness and heartbreak, the sad Egyptian girl Ikram stopped speaking and began to cry. Her crying turned it into a violent reaction, and she went into hysterics with bouts of insane and anger. She hit her cheeks, pulled her hair, and cried like a wounded woman who wanted to scream all the pain from her chest. Her friend Hafiz held her hands and prevented her from hurting herself. Then he took her in his arms and he also cried with her. with deep sadness and righteous anger that filled his heart. After drinking some glasses of liquor, she finally calmed down, and the two lovers became a little relaxed. On that day, the pain-stricken daughter Ikram decided to go to her mother, Khadija, and talk to her, regardless of the consequences. Her lover Hafiz reluctantly accepted her risky plan. He was afraid that his girlfriend might be arrested by the police and go to prison. It is not yet known why she fled her home and town and hid from the law. He asked her whether she had killed the Muhallil husband who had legalized her pussy for her ex-husband in order for him to remarry her. Ikram told him that she did never see again that ugly man who raped her in her backyard. He got the rest of his money and divorced her the next day after he fucked her and legalized her pussy with his penis for her ex-husband, who divorced her 3 times so that he could remarry her and disappear from their lives forever. Then the lawful wife remarried her ex-husband as soon as she left the hospital. The two rival wives, Nabila and Fatima, moved to their old home and lived with their husband and their son. However, on that day, the estranged girl, a fugitive from justice, stray, and former prostitute Ikram, and her boyfriend Hafiz left the hotel an hour before the previous day. They were carefully disguising themselves the way they did before. Ikram was very drunk that day because she drank a lot of alcohol. Because he saw her staggering, Hafiz suggested that they not walk but rather hire a taxi. He was afraid that she would fall on the side of the road, hit her head, and lose consciousness. If something like this happened to her, she might be taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and her true identity would be revealed. After her treatment, she would be put behind bars and tried for her crime, which forced her to flee from her family, husband, and sons, and town, and fall prey to prostitution and addiction. It was a 20-minute taxi ride from the hotel to her parents' house. Once the taxi arrived at her family's home, Ikram asked the cab driver to allow them to stay inside his car. They agreed with him to pay additional money for delaying and waiting until they completed their mission. After waiting for an hour, Ikram saw her mother, Hajj Khadija, leaving their house. She quickly got out of the taxi and asked Hafiz to follow her closely. Her mother was going in the opposite direction. They quickened their steps until they reached her. When the mother felt that some people were following her, she stopped, turned it around, and faced them. She looked at them with fear and saw that they were thugs who wanted it to take her and steal her purse. Ikram whispered quietly, "Do not be afraid, my beloved mother. I'm your runaway daughter Ikram." The mother couldn't believe her ears when she heard a strange girl talking to her. She recognized her daughter's voice, but not the stuttering girl in the black niqab, as if she were a Muslim terrorist wearing explosive vest and coming to blow herself along with her body into bits and pieces. Those years of abuse and suffering have changed Ikram so much that even her first Muslim husband, Al-Tayyib Saleh, may not recognize her. "Mom, come to the taxi. I have some questions to ask you." "Are you really my missing daughter Ikram?" the mother asked a little loudly. "Yes, I am your estranged daughter Ikram, and this is my third Muslim husband, Hafiz." The mother looked at her prodigal daughter's new husband for a while and then turned her gaze to Ikram. She was still in a shock. The daughter took her mother by the hand and led her to the taxi. Then the taxi approached them in his car and Hafiz waved his hand to the driver. The runaway wife opened the back door and asked her mother to enter first. Then she pushed herself behind her mother and sat remarkably close to her. When Ikram revealed her face, her mother recognized her. She embraced her lost daughter and began to cry bitterly. Ikram responded to her mother's feelings, hugged her, and cried with her. The taxi driver then moved his car toward the direction Hafiz had asked him to go. "Where are my sons Adil and Imad?" the runaway daughter asked her crying mother. "Where have you been, my daughter Ikram, all this time?" the mother asked while still crying. "I can't tell you anything now. I want to know what happened to my two sons after I escaped. The police took them away. They did not allow us to keep them." "What did the police do to them?" "They put them in an orphanage." "What happened to my husband, Al-Tayyib Saleh?" "Nothing happened to him." "Where is he now?" "He lives with his second wife, Nabila, and his two other Muslim wives." "Did he marry a fourth Muslim wife after I ran away?" "Yes, he married a woman named Sakina, but I don't know much about them." "Did any of his three Muslim wives give birth to a child?" "God did not bless him with a child with any one of his three wives, Nabila, Fatma, and Sakina. He was unable to produce a successor. They are barren women. Why can't he be the one who is barren and unable to have children?" "But he's a man, and the Imam of the mosque, Sheikh Atiyatullah, said that a man cannot be barren." Ikram wanted to tell her mother that may God's curse be upon the Imam and his false teaching, but she restrained her righteous anger. Instead, she asked her, "Where is the orphanage where my sons Adil and Imad are kept?" "It is located near the main prison." "Have you visited my children since the police took them to the orphanage?" "Imam Atiyatullah advised us to disown them because they are illegitimate children. So you, their grandmother, haven't seen them since I left them and ran away?" "I never saw them again because they were the children of adultery and indecency," Ikram said to her mother while she was about to clog her throat with intense righteous wrath and strangle her to death. "Will you get out of the taxi now? I do not want to see your face again, and from today onwards I disown you because you are a hard-hearted grandmother, and God has removed mercy from your accursed heart. I even disown my father Saleh, my brother Samir, and all my other relatives, and may God's curse be upon them, both the living and the dead. Consider me dead in your life and never ask about me again." Ikram felt like pushing her hard-hearted mother out of the taxi until she fell upside down on the ground, but somehow she managed to control her righteous anger. That night, the sad Egyptian girl filled her stomach with a large amount of alcohol. She had never drank as much as she did that day. She couldn't believe that people could be so merciless and heartless as her family. During her drunkenness, she was constantly crying for her two innocent children, Adil and Imad. She despised herself even more when she realized that she was the cause of their misery. Her heartbroken boyfriend Hafiz tried to lend more about the rest of his heartbroken girlfriend's tragic story, but he couldn't. Ikram was very dead drunk and had become so intoxicated that she did not know what to say or do. She mentioned the names of some people whom she had not mentioned before and said confusing sentences from which Hafiz could not understand any meaning. When she was no longer able to move one of her lips, she asked her friend to pour alcohol into her mouth, but Hafiz refused to do so at first. When he refused to pour alcohol into her mouth like medicine, she began quarreling with him and accusing him of conspiring against her with her accursed family. She said to him, "You are like them, a treacherous friend, and all of you are slutty and obscene, and all of her family members are prostitutes and sodomites." In order to please her, Hafiz filled the rest of the bottle with water and began pouring it into her mouth until she fell asleep. Chapter 9. When the Egyptian girl Ikram, who fell from her bed on the hard marble floor while sleeping, overcame her stupor caused by drinking a large amount of alcohol and woke up from her sleep, it was already the next day. It was already evening. Hafiz was concerned about her health. He stayed by her side most of the time. He hesitated to take her to the hospital for her safety. He became more afraid that the police would arrest her after he heard her talking and quarreling with her mother yesterday. He is now afraid that the hospital administration would recognize her and inform the police. He did everything to help her get back to normal. He picked her up from the hard wood floor and placed her on the bed. He poured cold water on her head. He helped her vomit up the large amount of alcohol she had consumed the night before. When Ikram woke up from the alcoholic stupor, she felt a severe headache and felt as if like she had been hit by a sledgehammer on her head. Her eyes could barely open. Hafiz gave her some over-the-counter medications, which eased her headache. Then he ordered for her from the hotel restaurant black coffee without milk. After another hour, his girlfriend Ikram began to feel better. She wanted to drink again, but Hafiz stopped her. She was only allowed to smoke. After some time, Ikram was able to eat some food. Then she took a shower with cold water. After eating and showering, she was completely sober. She sat by the window and continued smoking. After a long silence and smoking, the prodigal daughter Ikram looked at her friend Hafiz and said, "Do you want to hear the rest of the story?" "Yes, my dear, tell me what happened to you." "Yes, my dear, tell me what promoted you to flee your home, your city, and the police." "After the Mahallil man raped me and legalized my pussy, my ex-husband took me back to his house after marrying me again. We lived in peace for a few months. In order to please me, my husband officially divorced his second wife, Nabila, and closed her chapter forever. At least that is what I thought until I met my mother yesterday and learned that he had brought her home. What a foolish and naive girl I was at that time. I wasted the best year of my life competing with my nemesis, Nabila. In the end, I lost everything, and she gained everything. I lost my two children, my husband, my honor, and myself. I became homeless and helpless on the streets until I ended up in brothels and bars, selling alcohol and drugs, and my body was like a denigrated, worthless prostitute. I sold alcohol, drugs, and my body, something no free and honorable Arab girl would ever do. I became addicted to drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes and shisha. One mistake I made in haste and ruined everything. I wish I could change the history of my life and go back to the time before I met my husband. I feel ashamed of my past. I hate my husband bitterly and I hate my ex-girlfriend Nabila so much. My husband is supposed to be called the bad ghost or a demon, not a type Saleh, which means the good person. The stray girl and runaway wife Ikram uttered the last sentence while crying bitterly, half extended her face to him and allowed her to bury her head in his chest. Please, Hafiz, let me drink some alcohol. I need to drink now more than ever in my fucking useless life, the fallen girl said, still crying. Hafiz looked at her face and saw tears covering her eyes, which were still red with alcohol. He looked at her with pity. He knows that she has become an alcoholic or lost her mind. He felt that if he didn't let her drink, she might die of sadness. He brought the bottle and filled her cup. With trembling hands, Ikram emptied 3 cups of strong Abyssinian anisha into her stomach before beginning to speak again. My problems suddenly started again. One day I was alone in my room at my husband's house. My husband was at work. By the way, after the deaths of his mother and father, my husband had to go to work. His father died while I was at my parents' house after my said divorce. The Sharia court disputed his parents' property and wealth between him and his 9 siblings. Even the house we were living in was sold at auction, and the money was divided among the 10 siblings according to the Sharia law based on the teaching of the Holy Quran and the blessed Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. My husband got very little money from his deceased parents. After that, we lived in a rental house, and my husband had to work to support us. After he brought me back, he divorced his wife Nabila and sent his wife Fatima to our family's house without divorcing her. The two of us now live with our son Adil in a small rented house. At any rate, one day I was lying in a bed reading a book. It is a sad novel written in French and translated to Arabic. It is called Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I was very immersed in the tragic events of that book's story. It was the afternoon of a very hot summer day. I opened the window and pulled the curtain to let fresh air into the room. Our window opened onto the street. My young son Adil was sleeping in another small room near our bedroom. While I was reading the long story of the novel, I suddenly felt something hit my face, so I screamed in terror and jumped out of my bed. I hesitated to look out the window. I looked at the bed to see what was wrong with me. I saw a big white envelope lying near the pillow on which my head was lying. I knew someone had thrown that envelope into my room through the window. At first, I was afraid to approach it. I thought about calling our neighbor Hamid. I dropped the idea because he was the only male neighbor next door to us. He was a bachelor and a handsome single young man. My husband won't like it if he finds out that I brought a man home in his absence. I remember what happened between us when the neighbor saw my Christian lover Gabriel and told my husband about him. So I gathered my courage and went to the bed. I looked out the window, but I didn't see anyone standing outside. I looked at the envelope, then I lifted it. It was very heavy. I quickly jumped on the bed and closed the window. For a while, I hesitated to open that envelope and see what was in it. I thought I should keep it until my husband came home from work and opened it himself. But something inside me made me open it. Slowly, fearfully, and cautiously, I opened it as if I expected there to be a bomb or a snake inside. I found some pictures and a small piece of white paper inserted inside. When I saw the first picture, I saw what I never expected to see in my entire life. I saw my own photo. I was photographed completely naked without even my underwear and bra. I was lying on a I was photographed completely naked without even my underwear and bra. I was lying on a big bed. The second photo showed that I was having sex with someone. I couldn't see his face, but I saw his butt. The next picture showed my pussy and my black pubic hair, covering it as a dead rat over it. Many dirty pictures of me completely naked and fornicating with that man. I was amazed when I saw all these pictures as if they were pornographic clips taken from the internet. Then I opened the note on the white paper and read it. The memo stated that if I did not appear on a specific date and address, copies of those obscene pornographic images would be mailed to my Muslim husband Atayb Saleh and my family. I saw my shameful pictures again. These pictures were worse than clips from pornographic films on the internet. They showed all my private parts, even my light buttocks, my black pubic hair, and my red pussy hole were exposed and visible. If I had to willingly participate in taking some pornographic photos for money, I would not consent to being shamefully photographed as those photos reveal me to be. At first, I decided to wait until my husband came and showed him the photos and the blackmail letter that demanded that I come to a specific place to meet whoever took those photos without my knowledge. I knew that I had not had sexual intercourse with any man except my husband Atayb Saleh, my Coptic Christian boyfriend Gabriel, and the Muhallil husband who is called the lawgiver of the tribal divorced wife's pussy. None of these three men would do anything like that without my knowledge. The man having sex with me in the pictures was dark in color and had black hair. He does not resemble in any way the three men who slept with me willingly, unwillingly, and knowingly. So I concluded that the pictures were some kind of scam that was made using Photoshop or artificial intelligence by someone that he could blackmail me. I was determined to convince my husband, even my family if necessary, that I had never had sex with someone like the black man who appeared with me in the scandalous photos. Moreover, I have convinced myself that this is a conspiracy hatched by my sworn enemy Nabila to destroy my marriage because she thought it was because of me she had been divorced from her handsome cousin whom she loves to the point of worship. So I fooled myself into this naive belief for a while. As I overcame the horror of the shock, the wall upon which I had built my belief began to crumble. I recognized the clothes next to me in the photos as my own dresses. Then I began to recognize the furniture and other things in the room, which was like an operating room for my slaughter and skinning of my body while I was alive, and burying me in a cemetery while I was not dead. The truth attacked my heart like a major heart attack and hit my mind like a bullet, fear at a blank range. I have identified the culprit. He is Faki Mahmoud, the witch doctor who was supposed to treat me from barrenness in the past. Chapter 10. It was at his house when I went to meet him. I expected he would ask for money or sex. I wasn't prepared for either. I decided to threaten him that I would inform my husband and the police. When I talked to him, I discovered that he was such a wicked person that nothing in this world could scare him. He even dared me to use his cell phone to call my husband on his mobile phone and the police. I really hated him. I wished I had killed him with a knife at that time, but he forced me to accept his blackmailing demand. I gave in to his blackmail because I didn't want to ruin my life because of him. He claimed that my eldest son Adil was his son. He said that he was the one who raped me and impregnated me. He had admitted without shame or fear that he drugged me with something and raped me repeatedly in those days when he pretended to be a mighty witch doctor who could cure my barrenness. He said to me while he was raping my unconscious body in his room and on his bed, he used a woman to take photos and video. He even told me that the woman who pictured us was my neighbor who told me about him. He said he paid her a certain amount of money and convinced her to film the video and take the photos. He added that he was the one who fucked her in the pussy with his penis inside his house, in his room, and on his bed, and impregnated her with his child after she had spent 3 years with her barren husband without giving birth to a successor. That evil rapist, Faki Mahmoud, left me with no choice but to surrender to his blackmail. He raped me that day violently and without mercy. First, he told me that if I agreed to sleep with him once, he would not blackmail me again. I had no choice but to comply with his outrageous demand. I felt the same humiliation that I felt when my husband divorced me 3 times, allowing the thrice divorced wife's legalizer, who was called Muhallil, to rape me with his penis in my pussy to purify my vagina for my husband so that I could return to him. 2 months after I was raped through blackmailing, I discovered that Al-Faqih Muhammad had impregnated me with his child again. My husband at Taib Saleh thought the second pregnancy would be his baby too, so he treated me more lovingly. But despite his affection, I lived a miserable and terrible life during my second pregnancy. I spent most nights awake in my bed, silently shedding tears. My husband knew nothing about all this torment and remorse. I continued this hellish life until I gave birth to my second child. Everyone thought it was my husband's child. My husband gave him the name Imad at-Tayyib Saleh. Shortly after I delivered my second son, I received a phone call from the evil magician Faki Muhammad. He said he called to bless me and offer congratulations. Then he said that he wanted it to see his second baby. I hung up the phone on him and decided not to let him come near my body again. He called me again on my cell phone. I told him if he called me again, I would inform my husband and the police. He said that he is not afraid of any man who has a penis to have sex with a woman, even if it is bigger than his dick. He also said if I didn't bring his newborn to see him, he would tell my husband that the two boys were his. Despite his second threat, I did not give in to his evil demand at first. I told him to go ahead and inform my husband and everyone else. A week later, my mother Khadija came to my house and showed me a letter that someone had sent her with her home address, but it bore her daughter's name Ikram. She said she actually opened the letter and saw some of those dirty pictures. The photos did not reveal his identity because my mother did not see him when I claimed that he would treat me from being a barren wife. It was my female neighbor who introduced me to him and used to accompany me to visit him. At the time, I refused to tell my angry mother, who was the person who forcefully fucked me in those dirty pictures. She did not believe that he had raped me by force, and she believed that I had committed adultery with him in order to have illegitimate children because I did not want my husband to marry my ex-friend, neighbor, classmate, and bitter enemy Nabila. So my outraged mother scolded me and told me that I had brought a huge scandal to the family and to my innocent Muslim husband at Saleh. I was unable to justify myself to her because the photos did not prove that the sex was not consensual. Besides the dirty photos, the evil witch doctor sent a small note addressed to me. Fortunately, my mother did not know how to read or write. He stated in his second note that if I did not come to his house within 24 hours, he would send the obscene photos and shameful videotape to my honorable husband Atayb Saleh by urgent mail. He claimed that he also had a video showing a pornographic film of me consensually fornicating with him. His letter left me with three options. Either I kill myself by burning my body, which he defied by his repeated rape of me, or kill him by stabbing him in the heart with a knife and then cutting off his impure throat and dirty penis, or I flee from home and my city and become homeless on the streets or a prostitute in another city. I wish I had killed him with my kitchen knife or stabbed my heart with a poisoned dagger and died that day. Unfortunately, I've been a cowardly, adulterous, despicable woman and a dirty person in reality. If I were a brave, honorable, and chaste wife, I would have killed him first and then myself second. Instead of doing that, I went to his house and allowed him to rape me again. He started dictating his blackmailing terms to me. Whenever he wanted me in his bed, I went to him and gave him my body to discredit it with his repeated adultery. He has enslaved me sexually ever since, and I have become as if he owned me as his right-hand possession, like a jaria or a slave girl. I became like a woman who was forced to take drugs and alcohol and became addicted and could not get out of them. What a cowardly and helpless woman I was at that difficult time in my miserable life. I allowed him to abuse my defiled body with his adultery whenever he wished. He was a sadistic man who enjoyed rough sex by having violent intercourse with his sexual partner through torture. He did not limit himself to repeatedly raping me in my pussy, but rather forced me to have anal sex with him. I was screaming in terrible pain when he jammed his huge cock into my little ass. I was like a dancing hen slaughtered by a sharp knife when his large cock tore up my anus hole for the first time. Blood gushed everywhere from my rectum, and I felt like I had been subjected to major surgery without anesthesia. The rabbit wife stopped talking and began to cry bitterly as if she had lost her two sons. Her friend Hafiz carried her in his arms and kissed her cheeks and lips, then hugged her very lovingly and also cried with her. She kept screaming from the terrible pain that was eating away at her chest like cancer while burying her head in her friend's chest. Suddenly, Ikram pulled her body away from Hafiz, grabbed the bottle of strong Abyssinian whiskey, and began to empty it into her stomach quickly. She was drinking alcohol like water or a medicine. Her friend snatched the bottle from her hand before she could finish it and probably died of a heart attack. She cried and begged him to return the bottle to her so she could empty it into her stomach, but he refused. When he was unable to convince her to stop drinking, he agreed to let her drink from a cup. Ikram hurriedly emptied the cup in her mouth that Hafiz had poured it for her. Then she returned it to him to refill it with strong Abyssinian whiskey, which Asubian whiskey, which was an alcoholic density of 65%. Ikram drank the second cup like drinking water. She started coughing violently. Hafiz rushed to the table and brought her a cup of cold water to drink. While she was drinking water, she was breathing hard. It took nearly half an hour for her breathing to stabilize. Hafiz said anxiously, "My dear Kram, please do not destroy yourself with alcohol." The Egyptian fallen girl, stricken by the terrible pain of psychological trauma, wanted it to speak, but her coughing began again. "Please, my love, save the rest of your story for tomorrow. You should now go to bed and get plenty of rest," Hafiz said worriedly. His girlfriend obeyed him and tried to get to her feet, but she fell in front of her chair and prostrated on the floor as if she was kneeling in an Islamic prayer. Hafiz picked up her fallen body from the hard marble floor and placed her on the bed. Then he planted a kiss on her forehead and covered her with a blanket. Her mind was confused again from the intense state of intoxication, and she did not know what she said or did. The Egyptian girl Ikram, who became addicted to alcohol and smoking, came out of her stupor caused by drinking Asubian made alcoholic beverages the next morning. She spent a long time in the bathroom sink. When Ikram got out of the shower, she felt refreshed. She sat on the bed and started smoking silently. She inhaled her cigarette and let the smoke slowly exit her mouth. Her eyes followed the white smoke until it disappeared into the thin air. The light amount of alcohol she drank last night seemed to ease her emotional pain. Harvey sat on the other side of the bed and continued to look at her. It was beautiful and very interesting to look at her long legs and exposed thighs and hips along with the bed, forming a triangle shape. She was wearing a short dress that reached just below her lower buttocks. Her legs, thighs, and hips were yellow and looked like pure gold. They hit her chest, which was covered by a small cork without sleeves. Her hands were folded and placed on her knees. Her head was resting on one of her arms. Every now and then, her left hand would slip under her tight panty and touch her private part. It also go up and touch one of her big breasts, which are rounded like two bomb grenades. She looked very sexy and hot in her dress and sexual position at this time. Her large, beautiful eyes, decorated with crescent-shaped eyebrows, were constantly staring at her friend Harvey. Her lips kept smiling at him constantly, as if she wanted it to arouse him sexually, to make love to her. Harvey continued to look at her beauty and charm and lusted after her sexually exposed body until his penis became erect. Although his desire to have sex exceeded his self-control, he kept waiting for her to surrender to him when she wanted him to have sex with her willingly and lovingly. He enjoyed seeing her so calm and relaxed. Today she looked different from other days. She no longer appears as disturbed, confused, and sad as she did while telling the story of her tragic past life. As he expected, she was the one who took the first step in making love. She crawled towards him with her knees on the bed, then got up and sat on his lap. Hafiz carried her in his arms and hugged her affectionately. Then he kissed her lips. Their bodies were rubbing each other with strong sexual desire and hot passion. They were great moments. Only their bodies and breasts express the love they have for each other. While she was in that high sexual climax until her pussy became wet and her lover's cock became erect and some semen fluid from it, she stopped her movement and rubbed her semi-naked body against her lover's body and began to speak. Yes, that was in his house when we were caught red-handed. Her head was resting on her lover's chest. He's lying on the bed and she's on top of him, and he makes her get into the cowgirl sex position, which the favorite sexual method of hers. Ikram slept with her friend Hafiz until she reached a vaginal orgasm, and he ejaculated his white sperm in her large in large quantities into her wet pussy. Her breasts had not yet stabilized from the pleasure of the hot sexual love she had with her lover. She lay on top of him, completely naked, and pressed her chin to his to her boyfriend's chest as she spoke. She pronounced her sentence as if she understood that her lover had guessed what she wanted it to say. Little did I know that my husband began to doubt my behavior. I also do not know whether he notices it himself or if someone saw me repeating my visit to Faki Mahmoud's house during his absence when he left for work and informed him that I was seeing another man. Suddenly, Ikram lifted her body from her boyfriend's body and sat on the bed. Her friend noticed the sudden change on her face. She became serious and angry again. The peace and quiet and joy of sex have disappeared, replaced by fear and turmoil. Her friend saw her trembling hands reaching the bottle of whiskey and the pack of cigarettes. She donned her glass in one gulp and lit her cigarette. She then refilled her glass before resuming her story. Harvey sat in amazement next to her, waiting for her lips to reveal the reason for her sudden change. Ikram said with great fear and horror, "My husband stabbed Faki Mahmoud in his back several times with a large knife like a dagger." She uttered the above information as an eyewitness who was witnessing a murder and telling it to someone else at the same time. Hafiz became a little confused by the sequence of the events in her story. He had already guessed that something like this would come sooner or later, but not suddenly, grossly, and crudely. Before he asked his girlfriend to slow down and tell him what happened, she moved on to the next step. Faki Mahmoud was an unusually strong man. He managed to get up and try to control my angry husband, who was agitated and foaming like a camel. I screamed at the top of my lungs for help when I saw blood pouring from the back of the stabbed blackmailer, and my husband holding a large knife in his hand as if it were half a double-edged sword. Visitors and neighbors rushed into the room of the famous witch doctor. They detained my husband. Faki Mahmoud's stabbed body dropped to the ground. He did not last long until he took his last breath and was killed instantly. The neighbors and visitors were in two minds and puzzled by the heinous crime. They did not know why my husband killed the witch doctor. Faki Mahmoud was known for his religiosity and uprightness, as if he was one of God's righteous living saints. He was a popular and very famous Faki and was loved by many people. They didn't know him as a scam man, a blackmailer, and a rapist. My husband stormed into his private room before we started having sex. We haven't taken off our clothes yet. Faki Mahmoud was holding me in his arms and kissing my lips when my husband opened the door and ran towards us with a large knife in his right hand, drawn like a sword. He saw me as his unfaithful Muslim wife was caught red-handed committing adultery with another man. It was surprising to me and strange that instead of attacking and killing me, the adulterous and faithful wife to her legal spouse, my angry husband pursued the adulterer, Faki Mahmoud. Then Ikram stopped for a moment and poured her alcohol drink into her mouth. She refilled the cup again and drank it all. She lit another cigarette from the same one she had. Hafiz knew that. Ikram became confused again when he saw that the first cigarette was not half smoked. Visitors and neighbors questioned me, and I said that I had come to be treated and healed by Faki Mahmoud. Somebody called the police and reported the murder. Some men continued to detain my husband, who was still agitated and cawing like a camel. But before the police arrived at the scene of the heinous crime, I fled and disappeared forever from my murderous husband, from the murderous rapist, Seta Mahmoud. Ikram stopped talking and looked at her friend, half stared at her troubled face with eyes full of pity. He is still amazed at her explanation of the reason that made her, as a wife, run away from her husband and her town. His girlfriend told him about Faki Mahmoud's murder in a few details and in confusing sequences. He would need to ask her dozens of questions to understand the sad incident. However, he preferred to ignore the details and ask her to tell him what happened next. The escaped Egyptian wife Ikram said, I don't know. I don't know what happened after that. I think the police found my explicit photos and pornographic video in Faki Mahmoud's house. I do not think that my husband was charged with first-degree murder because Sharia law does not condemn a husband who, for his honor, killed another man who committed adultery with his unfaithful wife. He may have been tried and received a life prison sentence. Also, the police may not have arrested him on that fateful day. Only God knows what happened after I escaped in terror. My two children were considered illegitimate children, and then they were sent to an orphanage as if they had become outcast children whom no one would care to keep from the family members of their traitorous, murderous mother, traitorous and adulterous mother who fled from them and left them like stray dogs in the streets. It is certain that my husband, his family, my parents, and my brother Samir have disowned and abandoned them forever. They did nothing wrong, but the harsh Islamic society punished them for the sins of their parents. The runaway wife Ikram Saleh uttered the last sentence while crying bitterly. Her loyal and guardian angel Hafiz Amin embraced her and began to cry bitterly with her.